Good morning, everybody. You're really welcome to this webinar. We're just letting people join the session at the moment, so we'll just give it another minute and then we will get going with the webinar. While you're waiting, the chat function is currently open. So if you do want to introduce yourself with your name and where you're dialing in from to this webinar today, feel free to do that, and any interest you have in this topic from your background, your organization, or if you're a parent, please do just use the chat to say hello this morning. Okay, I think we will get going. Welcome everyone to the launch of Our Children, Our Future, a Parents' Manifesto for Healthy Children's Food. We're really excited to welcome you to this webinar today. Before we start properly, I would just like to run through a few housekeeping items. So firstly, today's webinar is being recorded, including the sound and the slides, and we will be sharing that with you after the webinar. Only the speakers and panelists' videos are going to be featured, so you're completely safe, and we won't be publishing the chat. Talking of the chat, I would really like to encourage you to use the chat box at the bottom to introduce yourselves. Do say where you're joining from and any interest you have in this discussion. We're going to keep the chat function open for just the first 10 minutes of the webinar, so do introduce yourselves now. We are going to then close it during the main body of the session, and that's because feedback shows that for inclusion purposes, it's better not to have too many distractions and people can focus on what the speakers and the information that you're seeing is saying. During this period, however, you will see at the bottom of your screen there is a Q&A tab. That's going to remain open throughout the webinar, and that's the place that you can post your questions for all of the panelists. And the panelists will be able to see that, and they'll be responding online, writing answers, but also we'll use that for the discussion, and I'll bring the speakers in to answer your questions. So please do use the Q&A function. And then in the last 10 minutes of the webinar, we will reopen it so that if you've got any other reflections or comments, or if you've got links to interesting resources you'd like to share, you're able to do that at the end of the session. So I hope that's okay. So chat's open now and at the end, and Q&A is the place to put all your questions throughout the webinar. So we'd also just like to take the opportunity to remind you that we are a diverse and inclusive community. So we don't tolerate any discrimination. So if we see anything that we feel is uncomfortable, we will remove it. But also just please be considerate of everybody's point of view, and be careful about the language that you use, cultural references. And I'm particularly mindful that children's eating and healthy eating can be sensitive subjects. And, we all know that sometimes people feel a bit judged or stigmatized or blamed in the media very often. So we're really trying to make sure this is a really supportive and inclusive conversation this morning. So we're looking forward to having an event that feels safe and everyone is respected. If you do see anything or have any concerns, please do get in touch. Finally, if you do use social media, we'd love you to share your thoughts in your networks. Please use the hashtag #OurChildrenOurFuture, all one word. And you can also tag us on X and Facebook at Children's Food or Children's Food Campaign. So that's it for the housekeeping for now. Let's get on with the main event. I'm really excited to be hosting this webinar today. A little bit about us. The Children's Food Campaign brings together over 100 organisations who campaign for policy changes in our schools, in our local communities and throughout society, so that all children can easily eat healthy and sustainable food. Ensuring that children have healthy, balanced nutritional meals, we know is a daily challenge faced by millions of parents, and our research does illustrate that very strongly. It really ought to be easy for children to eat healthily, but lots of parents feel that there's so many external factors influencing choices and behaviors that then make this task much more difficult than it should be. So that's why about 6 months ago, we launched a new Children's Food Ambassador panel of parents, and we are now working with 13 exceptional people drawn from different backgrounds across England. We may go wider than England in the future, but for now it's in England, and who have children of different ages, to try and make sure we are hearing parents' voices in our campaigns and in our policy positions. And also we're providing a platform for parents to raise their own voices on issues of children's food. To amplify the Children's Food Ambassador insights, we've also commissioned Savanta to conduct nationwide polling of parents, probably one of the most comprehensive polls of parents on food topics, to help us understand their concerns and the top policies that would enhance healthy eating opportunities for children, with the aim of uncovering all the barriers and the policies that would have most support from parents. We then conducted multiple workshops, and using insights from the research, we've co-created this manifesto with our Children's Food Ambassadors. So in today's webinar, they're going to present to you the 5 key pillars of the manifesto with their own reflections. Plus, we've got some brilliant guest speakers from School Food Matters, from the youth campaign charity Bite Back, and from the parenting platform Netmums. And thank you so much to them for joining us today. And alongside that, my colleagues are going to be bringing you some of the insights from the polling, a bit like, you know, the report's pretty long, we're going to make it easy and give you the highlights. And then, as I say, at the end of the webinar, there will be a Q&A where you have a chance to ask your questions, but please put your questions throughout the webinar. So with that said, we are going to close the chat in the next 60 seconds. So get your intros in the next minute, and then my colleague is going to close the chat, and we're going to move on to the initial insights. So I'd like to bring in now my colleague, Dr. Colette Marr, who has joined us and has been leading the research and the polling with our parents, and also is the lead author on the manifesto, working with Naima and all of our ambassadors. So thank you, Colette, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Barbara. As Barbara said, I'm so excited to be sharing with you the findings from our parent polling. But first, what I want to do before I begin that is just turn it around, kind of find out what you think as an audience. So I really want to find out how well you think parents are being supported by the government with their children's food. So I'm just going to launch a quick poll that should appear on your screens very shortly. Hopefully that is on your screen. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you rate the government's efforts to support parents in ensuring children have healthy and nutritious food, with 1 being very poor support from the government and 10 being excellent support from the government? I can see lots of answers coming in now, so that's brilliant. It means it's working, which is good to know. I'll just give it a few minutes and let everyone answer before I share the findings with you all. So I think we've got most of, a few more trickling in. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. So thank you very much for your answers, and I'll hopefully be able to share the results with you now. So it looks like we have 32% who think that the government are only supporting parents up to a level around 3, so really not very much support. We've got, I think the highest we've got is 7, so really I think this indicates that we don't really think much of the government's efforts, and they could be doing a lot more. So thank you very much for providing your answers for that poll there. I think it's really interesting to see what you all think. just close that now. So, as Barbara said, in January, we commissioned Savanta to conduct a nationwide poll of parents to find out the top policies that parents think would best support them in providing their children with healthy food. So in January, we had over 2,000 parents complete the survey, and it was a 10-minute online survey, and the data collection process was designed to ensure a nationally representative sample. This included quotas on socioeconomic groups, region, and age of child. Once the data was collected, further weighting was also applied to gender and socioeconomic groups to reflect the reviews of the entire population. So what are parents concerned about? So we asked parents what they think the 3 most important issues facing the country are, and we found that parents think that cost of living is their top concern, followed by the quality of the NHS and the state of the economy. We then asked parents what they thought their top 3 biggest cost of living concerns were, and we found that food prices were their top concern, and that was above the cost of utility bills and the cost of housing. For parents from the most vulnerable economic groups, they also found it significantly more likely to choose food prices, and also parents with children of secondary school age children. We then asked parents about their children's eating habits, and worryingly, we found that 7 in 10 parents are finding it a challenge to get their children to eat healthily, and 7 in 10 parents also worry about what their children are eating. And 9 in 10 parents say that their child eating healthily is a priority, but 8 in 10 think it's becoming more difficult, not easier, to ensure their children do eat healthily. So what government policies do parents support? So we presented parents with a list of 12 different policies and asked them to indicate their levels of support for these policies. We found that at least half of parents support all the policies listed here, but the greatest amount of support parents gave was to broadening access to healthy school food for a larger number of children. This was followed by expanding funding for voucher schemes for low-income families, and for requiring state-funded nurseries to ensure food provided is nutritious and healthy. The policies that had the least amount of support was ending sports sponsorship by unhealthy food and drink brands and banning advertising of unhealthy food and drink online. Nevertheless, these policies still got over more than half of parents supporting them. When we look at the top 5 supported policies, we also find that there's consistent support across demographics. So parents supported these top 5 policies regardless of gender, regardless of socioeconomic group, and regardless of ethnicity. We then asked a slightly different question. So we asked parents to choose the top 3 policies that they thought would best support them to encourage their children to eat healthily. And although broadening access to healthy school food was still number 1, we found that banning the sale of high caffeine energy drinks to children under 16 and banning advertising of unhealthy food and drink on TV before 9 p.m. became top policies. I'm now going to, we're going to start the kind of first main section of the webinar, and I'm going to hand you over to Naima, who's going to introduce some of the findings of, from our polling on school food. And then she'll pass you over to Mary Needham Carlton, one of our fantastic children's food ambassadors, who's going to introduce our first manifesto pillar. And as Barbara said, at the end of this section, we'll then also have a reflection discussion from our guest speakers. So that will be Mary, but also Jaynaide, another one of our children's food ambassadors, and Stephanie Slater from School Food Matters. So I'm just going to turn my camera off and hand you over to Naima.
Thanks, Claire. So we asked 2,000 parents how they would like to improve access and quality of school food. Here's what they said. Parents overwhelmingly support expansions of healthy school meals, with the greatest support for providing free school meals to all children in poverty, backed by 89% of parents. Immediate expansion of school food to all children follows, with 75% of parents backing this policy. Greater support of this policy came from more economically vulnerable people and families. We also asked parents if they thought their children's lunches were nutritious and appealing. Just over half of parents perceive school lunches to be nutritious. These parents commented on the wide variety of healthy options as a positive factor. We found that parents who disagree are more likely to be parents of secondary school children, who commented about the lack of healthy options. When we asked parents about different policies to improve school food, 8 in 10 parents want school meals to offer a range of healthy options, schools to serve more fresh fruits and yogurts for desserts instead of cakes and sugary puddings, tight enforcement of mandatory food standards in schools. More than 3 in 4 parents want schools to serve food that is great and good for nature and environment, but just over half support meat-free days and healthy plant options. Overall, it's clear majority of parents want schools to serve more healthy and planet-friendly options at school for all children. I'm now going to pass over to our Ambassador Mary, who will present our first manifesto point.
Thanks, Naima. Good morning, everybody. So I'm really excited to be sharing with you our first manifesto points, calling for the government to act on school food. As Naima mentioned, improving school food was revealed in the polling as the top priority for parents across the UK. And I know that myself and all the ambassadors believe that changes in the school food system can make a big difference to children's health. So we're calling on the government to make free, healthy and sustainable food a priority for all our children from nursery to sixth form and college. So to do this, we want the government to commit to a progressive approach to expanding school foods for all and ensure that all our children have access to hot and nutritious meals and a hot, nutritious lunch. We also need the government to guarantee that the lunches and snacks served in our children's nurseries and schools meet the regulated, monitored school food and the current standards. The government needs to create a school food system where our school leaders, caterers and administrative staff feel empowered and supported to provide healthy, sustainable food to all our children, minimising the use of salt, sugar and fat in meals and snacks. And finally, we need an updated curriculum that actively encourages our children to engage in learning about food from farm to fork and ensures that the whole school environment puts these principles into action. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Claire and Naima, for presenting the manifesto. Mary and Naima. And I'm going to also now bring in another of our ambassadors, Jaynaide, and also invite our guest speaker. No, this should be Stephanie, shouldn't it, for school food? Yes, I'm going to bring in Stephanie Slater from School Food Matters to reflect on these findings. So Mary and Jaynaide, if you want to put your videos on first. And Jaynaide, I'm going to come to you first because there's been a lot of focus on school food. You've got a child in nursery, and that's been really important to quite a few parents as well, that this isn't just about primary schools or secondary schools, it starts in nursery. How do you feel about these findings? What do you want to see?
Thank you. Yeah, no, I have a 2-year-old son, and it's my only child. And I'm really pleased to see school food come on top, because I think, prior to having children, I think when we talk about school food, our minds go to primary and secondary school, our minds go to free school meals, quite rightly. But there seemed to be, in my mind, a lack of focus on kind of early year settings and the food provision in nurseries. And what I think is quite disappointing, I would say, is that, and something that a lot of people don't realise, is that the school standards in early year settings are not mandatory, they're voluntary. And so that means that they're not utilised and certainly not monitored. And so I would love to push for that to change. And I think it's quite a right time to do it. You know, there's been kind of a governmental focus on kind of increasing nursery places in early year settings. And I think, you know, if we're being encouraged to entrust our children in, you know, in nurseries and early year settings, then we should also be doing it with the knowledge that they're, you know, being given the best food possible for their development.
Yeah, and I think the issue is there's just then no consistency. So you have some nurseries doing brilliant work and some nurseries barely kind of following the voluntary standards and perhaps introducing foods that parents would prefer not to be part of that nursery day. Mary, I think you've got a 4-year-old child as well, but you also are a public health nutritionist. And I'm kind of really interested in your personal experience of this and the kinds of interventions that you would really like to see, you know, of all these kind of manifesto points, which are the ones that you feel most passionate about?
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with Jaynaide, what Jaynaide said about nurseries, but yeah, also my son is still at nursery, and he you know, they get, for me, it's my personal experience is how my son sort of changed when he went to nursery and what he wanted to eat at home. So he would be, you know, going to nursery and having, when he first went there, we sort of said to them, well, we don't want him to have high sugar puddings or sugary puddings, and we sort of requested that he had fruits. But then he felt kind of left out from the other children. So that was a problem, you know, that's difficult for parents as well. So that was difficult. But anyway, so he started having the sweet puddings, and then now he always wants a pudding at home, which we don't do every day in our house. So that's a habit that he's picked up at nursery. And, you know, obviously we know that the habits that children develop when they're very little, in their early years, are really sort of character forming, and we keep those habits often for our lives, and they're very hard to change when we get older. So I think, you know, nursery food is good nursery food, healthy nursery food, and developing healthy habits for children at nursery as well as in the home is really, really important. And yeah, in my professional role, I work with a lot of families on low incomes with children, and we do cooking workshops and interventions with those families around healthy eating and sustainable eating and cooking from scratch. And again, those families really struggle because there's so many outside influences, you know, next door to the local school with the families that we work with. There's 3 takeaways, there's the shop selling loads of sweets and sugar and drinks and crisps and all those things. So, you know, it's really, really tough. So they really struggle as well. And also, I think, you know, we're busy, aren't we, as parents? Most of us are sort of working, or you've got other children and other things to think about. So it's, you know, it's really tough. And so, yeah, I would say, you know, for me, you know, seeing such a great response and a high percentage of parents who would like to see changes to our school food is really encouraging, and hopefully the government will see it that way as well.
Great, thank you so much, Mary. I'd like to bring in Stephanie Slater from School Food Matters now. Stephanie's the founder and the chief executive of School Food Matters, and they do a lot of teaching of children about food and food growing, and to increase children's access to healthy and sustainable food in school. But also, Stephanie, your whole journey with School Food Matters started with you as a parent. So really interested to hear your reflections on this.
Yeah, and Barbara, I'm really glad that you've put this together, because parent power is awesome and it does bring about change. So I can say that because 16 years ago, I was a parent just like many of the ones on the call today. And it just baffled me that school food had got so complicated and yet was so unpopular in the London borough where my kids went to school. I often tell the story about the day we lived abroad. My children went to a Montessori nursery on Bondi Beach, where they used to grow their own vegetables and share around an outdoor table. It was like this sort of whimsical world. And we arrived back in London, and I popped them into the local primary school. And the first words I heard from the office manager was, "Sorry about the smell, that's lunch." And it was just this sort of fait accompli that school food was lousy and there was nothing we can do about it. Now, we had a bit of a turbocharge boost to the campaign in the shape of one Jamie Oliver. So I came in a year after he did his school dinners campaign, and I just thought it didn't have to be that complicated. And the best thing I had in my favour, like many of the people on this call, was absolutely no knowledge of public sector procurement. didn't even know what it was. My background was entirely different. So I went in, like you, as one parent going, surely we could do better. Let's be a bit more ambitious. And it took a bit of digging around, and obviously contracts are set. And I had to wait for the opportunity. So both local elections and also a break in the school food contract. But nobody could deny that there was a problem. Only 26% of children in that London borough on average were taking a school meal. I mean, that just tells you there's something wrong with the food. So it took a while, it took persistence, but like all of you on this call today, we just had a vision for something better. And we decided as parents that we wanted our children to go to school and have something nourishing and something that supported their good health. So 16 years later, we've moved from one London borough now to looking at policy in England, working with a lot of the people on this call. And we want to shift the dial. We want to change things for every child in every school. That's access and also quality to school food. So it's really, if I want to leave you with something, it's that parent power is awesome and you can bring about change. And if you ever want any campaign tactics as a parent in a local area, come and talk to us at School Food Matters, because that's how we began.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Stephanie. We've had a question online, and I think this is one that kind of Jamie definitely came up against, which is Sam has asked it, as an early years head chef, he thinks it's a great idea to remove sugar from sweet puddings, but also to rebalance sweet puddings with more sort of yogurts, fresh fruits, etc. And there was quite a lot of parental support, but sometimes when those attempts are made, there's kind of fears that parents will stop buying into school meals or that there'll be a backlash. So I'm really interested, Stephanie, what's been your experience of trying to swap out sweet puddings, and also then Jaynaide and Mary afterwards, if either of you want to come in.
Yeah, I can talk about our Healthy Zones programme. So we identified about 7 years ago that with children at school 190 days, there's a real opportunity to change children's relationship with food. As both of our parent panelists here have mentioned, it's a great opportunity to introduce them to new foods, to develop their tastes. And we absolutely, Barbara, I have heard over and over again about, in the office we call it custard gate, because there's this sort of perception that there's going to be a riot if we remove puddings. So what we did, which is what government should be doing too, is ask the children, ask the students, and we have done that through our Healthy Zones programme. And over again, it comes back that, we're really happy with fruit and yogurt. We don't have to have a pudding every day. So it's all about balance. It's not about banning things. It's about finding a balance. So start introducing some of the fresh fruit, start introducing some natural yogurts, so that it just turns down the dial on that sugary taste. And slowly you can move away from pudding and custard every day. There's also a misconception that we have hungry children, therefore we need to give them cake. It's a little bit Marie Antoinette. I'm not quite sure how we got there. We don't have to feed children cake if they're hungry. A banana does the trick too. So it's just about moving things gradually and introducing children and getting their voices into the conversation. And I think you'll find that they're absolutely okay with a bit of variety.
Mary, I think you already referred to this question as well. And how would you feel as a parent about kind of trying to kind of lobby nurseries to kind of bring in that switch, or how important is this to you as your child moves to primary school next year?
Yeah, I think it's of course about balance, and we're not, it's unrealistic to expect that our children or anybody or any of us would only want to eat fruit all the time. Everybody likes cake, everybody likes puddings. But it is of course about balance, and it's also about educating not just the children, but obviously the chefs, and the chefs are, obviously chefs are sort of over the barrel a bit as well if they want to make healthy changes, but they've got, maybe they've got the school staff and the local government or whoever all sort of, coming in either ways to them and telling them, or trying to, have an influence on how they cook or what they provide. and budgets and all of those things. So, you know, there's a lot that comes into the school food and the nursery food, of course. But yeah, I think it's about asking parents as well, you know, asking parents in the local school, just putting out a survey or having an after school meeting for half an hour and maybe cooking off some of the dishes that you might want to introduce instead, and asking parents and children to taste them and give feedback. But yeah, I think, you know, I think it's about balance and it's about choice and education as well. And I think a lot of parents, it's a cultural thing as well, isn't it? You know, it's a cultural thing to have pudding, and we're sort of all brought up like that. And so a lot of parents perhaps are scared of making that change themselves because they don't want the backlash, or, you know, they might be worried that their children aren't going to eat that and they want their children to eat. So yeah, so there's obviously loads of factors, but I would just say, you know, asking parents and children and teachers and perhaps doing some taster sessions and things like that is probably going to help to bring about some change within individual schools.
Thanks, Mary. Would you like to add anything to this?
Sorry, was that me? Was you
Yes.
asking? Yes. No, nothing major to add. Just to say that I completely agree with Stephanie and Mary about kind of consulting with parents. I think one of the challenges with kind of school settings is that it's as parents, we try really hard to kind of implement good healthy eating practices, good habits, and the school environment can be a place where that work is undone. So for example, you know, if at home, you know, we don't have dessert most days, and when we do, it's, you know, maybe a bit of yogurt or fruit, but that work is undone when he goes to nursery and they have kind of cake or, you know, for someone's birthday. So I think, you know, if there can be more consultations with parents about understanding what we do eat at home, so that, you know, when they are in these education settings, it's complementary and not, you know, undoing the work we do at home.
Yeah.
Barbara, can I just add one more point? Have you got time?
I was going to change topic, but yeah, quickly. Very
quickly, it's just saying this is where schools need help with policy. We need to update the school food standards. It's not for teachers and head teachers to be monitoring school food, to be dealing with complaints from parents. We need some help with the standards, so that's long overdue.
Brilliant. And that actually bridges us perfectly, Stephanie, which was this, we've had a question about the standards as well. And I think Jaynaide's already made the point that they're not mandatory in nursery, and that's one of the things that we think needs to change, but also they're not being monitored. Somebody's asked in the chat who we think would monitor the quality of food in schools and nurseries if we were successful in winning a government policy change on that. Stephanie, do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, definitely. The bottom line is somebody needs to do it. And we've had lots of different conversations about who should we do it. But I think there are 3 areas that we could work on here. There's a really interesting piece of work at the moment through the Food Standards Agency, using environmental health officers who go into schools anyway to just add a few more questions so they can take a look at whether the menus are compliant, and just have a look at school food. Now, this is a pilot program. The final report comes out in the summer, and we're really excited about it because it's already generating some interest within local authorities who want to have some training for their local authority environmental health officers to look at school food. So that's one area. Schools also have something to say about school food. I mean, they're the ones that know what's going on in their school, and a lot of them want to celebrate the good work that's happening there, because we have to remember that in a lot of schools there's some fantastic work going on. So we want to give schools the opportunity to report on what they're doing about quality, standards, compliance. And finally, I'm a bit old school on this, but I also think that Ofsted inspectors have a role to play. They don't need to be monitoring the food on the plate. They're not qualified to do that. But what they can do is ask who in the school is looking. And that generates action, we find, amongst senior leaders in schools. It's not about using a sledgehammer. It's about asking the right questions. And I think we should be pushing for that. But whatever happens, we need some sort of monitoring, because standards are only as good as the compliance that goes with them.
Great, thank you. We've had a question as well about, we've got a couple of questions about budget pressures. By the way, everybody on the webinar, if you see a question you like, you can also use the little thumbs up button to upvote that question so that we can see the questions that people most want to see answered. So yeah, if somebody's already asked the question, we're getting lots of really great comments about people who've got healthy schools programs. We've got question about universal school meals, and one of the things from the rollout in Wales is that some of the schools who've previously had high free school meal numbers have actually got low uptake of the universal offer, and what support is needed to make sure that when school meal programs get expanded, that the uptake really focuses on the children that need it the most. I'll come to you first, Stephanie, and then Mary or Jaynaide, if you've got anything to add.
I think that's a really interesting conundrum we're hearing from Wales. I hadn't heard that, and I'd like to unpack that a little bit more. But the beauty of a universal offer is it's a shared experience for all the young people in that space. It becomes a communal setting. It brings in the whole idea of food being a shared experience and a school experience. Children are required to be in school, ergo they should be eating together. It's another part of the school day. Now, if the question is about take up of free school meal allowance, that's a different conundrum. That's about processes, admin processes. So the other piece of policy that has to go along expansion of access is auto enrollment. I'm not going to get too technical here, but the fact that parents are given the job of completing the very complicated form and really opening themselves up to stigma is nonsense to us. There is a method and a way of getting to all the families that are eligible for free school meals, and we're putting up so many barriers. I think Henry Dimbleby put it really well in the National Food Strategy. It's admin paperwork shouldn't stand between a parent having access to a nutritious meal for their children. So if the question in Wales is about registration for eligibility for free school meals, ergo pupil premium, which is a school benefit, that's an admin thing that comes under the heading of auto enrollment. If it's about attracting children to sit down with their friends and sit together having lunch, I think we'd be looking at the quality of the food on the plate. I think if there's it's like way back, go back 16 years again to School Food Matters. If children aren't signing up for school meals, you've got to look at what's on the plate. That's a red flag. What's going on in the kitchen? What's going on? As I say, brilliant work happening, lots of places, some places not so good. So if they've got low take up and if the offer is free, first thing I'll be doing is looking at the menu and looking at what's happening on the plate.
Great, thank you. I think we're coming to the end of this section now. Mary or Jaynaide, any final thoughts from you on this topic from the conversation? Okay, we've had some great comments in the chat about having starters instead of puddings, having savoury second courses instead of sugary ones. There's a couple of questions, Stephanie, you might want to go in just and type an answer around budgets and funding questions. Where we haven't been able to come to a question, we'll see if we've got time at the end, but also we will try and make sure we get the panelists to answer those questions following the webinar if we haven't quite made it. But lots of really, really good comments about how to influence nurseries that are part of big chains, how to influence change at a local level. We're going to move on to the next part of the manifesto now. So thank you so much, Jaynaide, Mary, Stephanie. You'll be back with us at the end of the webinar for the Q&A, final Q&A, but we're going to start looking at advertising and packaging questions now, and promotions questions. I'm going to hand back initially to my colleague Colette, who's going to present the initial findings before bringing in our ambassadors again and our speakers. So over to you, Colette.
Thank you, Barbara. So today I'm going to be sharing with you some of parents' views on food advertising, marketing and packaging. We found that when we asked parents to indicate the extent to which their child is influenced by food and drink advertising, we found that to some extent, 9 in 10 parents believe that their children are influenced by unhealthy food advertisements. When we asked parents to indicate their level of concern around advertising, we found that 6 in 10 parents are worried about advertising of unhealthy food and drinks. And for families and parents from minority ethnic backgrounds, they're even more concerned. So nearly 8 in 10 parents from minority ethnic backgrounds were concerned about the amounts of advertising their children are exposed to. We then asked parents to indicate when the last time it was that they heard their child talk about a food or drink advert that they'd seen. And we found that over half of parents had heard their child mention a food or drink item in the last month, and 1 in 3 in the last week. We then asked them to indicate when was the last time that their child had asked them to buy or purchase a food or drink product based on an advert that they'd seen. And we found that 1 in 3 parents reported that their children had asked them to buy a food or drink item in the past week based on an advert that they'd seen. And again, this was even higher among parents from minority ethnic backgrounds, with half of parents reporting that their children had asked them to buy a product. When we asked parents whether they thought the government was doing enough to protect children from unhealthy food advertising, only 4 in 10 parents thought that they were. We then asked parents to indicate their level of support for advertising restrictions in the following areas. So online websites, on television, within half a mile of children's spaces, on public transport and in sports spaces. And generally, we found that parents are very supportive of restricting advertisements in these areas, with strongest levels of support for restrictions on online websites and on television. We then looked at the results of these, looking closer at those parents who were concerned about the amount of advertising and whose children had asked them to buy a product based on an advert they'd seen in the last month. And we found even higher levels of support, with nearly 9 in 10 parents supporting some of the advertising restrictions here, particularly on TV and within half a mile of children's spaces, on public transport systems and online. We also asked parents a series of questions around packaging and labelling of food products and food and drink. And we found that generally parents are paying attention to packaging information, such as ingredients lists and traffic light labelling and additional health claims on packaging. And when we asked them to indicate their level of trust for this information, we found that 3 in 5 parents trust the additional health claims on packaging, even though these can often be misleading. So 8 in 10 parents want the government to improve nutritional labelling on children's food and drink products. And the information provided on packaging of infant and toddler food can be particularly confusing and misleading for parents. And 8 in 10 parents also want the government to introduce new standards to ensure both the ingredients and marketing of baby and toddler foods support good nutrition. And 6 in 10 parents would support the government restricting the use of children's cartoons and favourite characters on products to only healthy food and drink items. So I'm now going to hand you over to Clare to introduce our next manifesto pillar.
Morning, everyone. Every day, our children are bombarded with advertising, and this includes a huge amount of unhealthy food advertising on their phones, on streets, and on TV. As parents, we feel that this is undoing all of our hard work in trying to reach and keep our children healthy. I'm therefore really pleased to be sharing with you our next call to action, and we want the government to protect our children from this flood of unhealthy food advertising and marketing. To do this, we need the government to introduce restrictions for unhealthy food adverts to children. On TV, by implementing the 9 PM watershed, on social media, around children's spaces and on public transport systems, and importantly, in sports places. We're also concerned about the number and frequency of promotions of unhealthy food on our children's mobile phones. The government must regulate access to and promotion on food apps that are targeting our children. We also want the government to restrict advertising of less healthy food and drink using celebrities, sports personalities, social media influencers, or cartoon heroes that glamorise and attract children directly. These promotional tactics should only be used on healthier food and drink. Finally, we need the government to put an end to multi-buy offers and promotions on unhealthy food and drink, such as 3 for the price of 2, 2 for £2, etc., that are so frequently found on our supermarket shelves. I'm now going to pass you over to Jaynaide to introduce our next manifesto pillar.
Thanks, Claire. I'm really pleased to present this next manifesto pillar to you all. So as a parent of a young child, I know firsthand how difficult it is to kind of sift through all the options that are on the shelves or in the shops to work out which ones are healthy and sustainable for the planet. Particularly when there are so many misleading claims out there about, how healthy they are. So on behalf of all the parents that took part in the poll and part of the ambassador programme, this next pillar is on the need for honest and trustworthy information on food and drink packaging. So as part of that manifesto point, we have 4 key demands or asks. So the first one is on the traffic light labelling system. And we're asking for it to be reviewed and improved and to be made compulsory. So I know many of you on the call today will have seen the traffic labelling system on many of the products in the shops. But what I think many people don't realise is that it's not mandatory. And I think what a lot of parents will notice as well is that it's not particularly common on foods that are targeted to babies and toddlers in particular. So we're asking for this to change. So it's easier for us as parents and caregivers to make the healthiest options for our families. The second point is on ultra-processed foods. So here we're asking for a consultation on our concerns as parents. There's been a lot of coverage in the media, new research, loads of books around, what ultra-processed foods are and are not, and how the impact they have on our health. And so we as parents are concerned about this. And what we're particularly concerned about is the fact that many food products that are marketed to children are we're given the impression that they're healthy, when in fact they are ultra-processed foods. So we're asking for this to be addressed and for our concerns to be consulted on. Relatedly, we're also asking for the mandatory removal of misleading health claims on children's products. It's very difficult as a parent when you go to the supermarket and you see products that have claims such as no added sugar or organic or 1 of 5 a day, but then on further inspection, it is in fact an ultra-processed food, or it has a high level of fruit concentrate. And so we're asking for these kind of health claims to be regulated and preferably removed to make it easier for us to make the right choices. And then our final ask is the restriction of the use of cartoons, child-friendly characters and other designs or promotional on-pack features on packaging that appeal directly to our children. I think it's extremely helpful for us to take our children with us when we go shopping, but that experience is tainted when the products that we don't want them to have or are not particularly healthy for them have their favorite cartoons, has Peppa Pig or Paw Patrol. It makes it difficult for us as parents to make the right choices. So we're asking for these to be removed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jaynaide and Claire. And I'd like now to also bring in Caroline Cerny, who is the Director of Policy Engagement at Bite Back, youth activist movement that gets youth voices to win political attention and the food system, but also helped set up the Obesity Health Alliance and has worked with the Department of Health on the childhood obesity plans. And this feels like a good place to bring you in. And you're also the mother of a couple of kids as well, Caroline. So, but before we come to you, Caroline, Claire, you've got children who are 9, 12 and 14. And this point that's come up in the research and the manifesto about the way in which this constant marketing, flood of marketing and advertising and nudges. How is that playing out in your in your kind of family and the people that you work with actually in Suffolk?
I think it's huge. I think it's an influence that we've become so familiar with that we don't really recognise its power, the pressure that it places under. And I think it wasn't until I started really looking into food packaging, food ingredients, the way foods are marketing, the way that as my children have got older, I realised they've got more autonomy over what's put in the basket, over what they choose, over their own at secondary school. They've got a lot of choice over what they can then go and purchase. And I think I hadn't really realised how much I was being influenced over the advertising, marketing, the way that food is promoted to you. And then now watching that through my children's eyes is really powerful. And you know, my children are very aware. They want to on the whole, we all like a balance in our diet, but they want to choose healthy options, and that can be really difficult when you're influenced or the information that you're given is misleading and not clear.
And quite often, Jaynaide and Clare, you know, when I've been interviewed on the radio about these topics, you know, you get people saying, well, parents should just say no. You know, if children are being influenced by this stuff, parents should just say no. Or how would you respond to that? Jaynaide?
I'd say that it's not that easy. I think my son is 2 and his favorite word at the moment is no. And I think any parent will understand that, you know, it's easier said than done. I think it's, you know, we want our kids to have autonomy and to understand what's healthy for them. And, you know, you can get into situations where kids start to refuse the food you offer when you're denying them what they want. And, you know, I think all parents have been in a situation where, you know, they say no to everything you offer them, and then you end up giving in because you want them to eat something. And so I just think that we need to, you know, be putting these restrictions in place so that they're not kind of tempted to the foods that are not good for them.
Yeah, I'm going to bring you in now, Caroline, as a parent and as somebody who has done a lot of work on advertising and marketing, and now also works to empower young people to do that campaigning. So what's your feelings about these findings? What are the ways in which parents are their job is just being made so much harder?
Yeah, thank you, Barbara. A really interesting findings, really positive findings as well, I think, to see the level of awareness now about the harm that this bombardment of marketing is doing. And I think both Jaynaide and Clare made really good points. Firstly, about how, you know, we're so normalised to it all, you know, even as adults. You know, I think everyone, when they start working in this area, has a bit of a penny drop moment when they realise just how much advertising is around, because it's just so normalised. We just take it for granted. And then suddenly, once you're aware of it, you see just how much of it there is. And it affects us as well. So it's great to see parents kind of knowing that it's a problem and recognising it's a problem. And the autonomy point is so important. I've got an 11 and a 14-year-old as well. And, you know, they make their way to and from school on their own. You know, I don't know what they're buying and eating on their way. I've got a good idea sometimes on the way home. And I think the importance of peer pressure is really important here. And that's something we hear a lot from our youth board members at Bite Back. You know, even when they're with a group of friends and their friends are all saying, well, you know, let's go to KFC, let's go to McDonald's. It's really hard to be the person that says, no, I don't want to, or, you know, I don't really like the food there, because at that age it's so important to fit in. And if we think about the type of marketing that these businesses put out, it's really clever and it's really culturally targeted to young people to make their brands look great and make them look cool and tap into all those kind of cultural reference points that are so important to young people. And it's just incredibly powerful. And I was really glad as well to see the in-marketing, the in-app marketing come up as well, because that is something we just hear hugely from our young people. And there's very little evidence on the scale of it, aside from anecdotal. But we know that all these businesses have apps there are no barriers to teenagers to download them. You know, all the apps say you have to be 18, but there's no barrier. There's nothing that stops a 14, 15-year-old. And from research that we've done with young people, we found the majority of young people will have one of these apps on their phones, you know, whether their parents know about it or not. And then that's just an open door for marketing. You know, you can't download the app without signing up for the marketing. And it's just a barrage, and it's often got a price promotion attached to it as well. So it's a deal, get money off, order now, get this for £1, get this for £3.
Yeah, and I remember one of your youth activists saying that when she finished her GCSEs, she got congratulations.
Yeah.
Congratulations on finishing your GCSEs. Celebrate by coming to our fast food store.
Celebrate with pizza.
Yeah, for pizza before her mum even managed to say, "How did it go?" Yeah. So yeah, it's very pervasive, and it's everywhere. The government has put in some restrictions that target children's media. The government has passed some legislation, but it's not going to come until October 2025. There's obviously, it feels like there's 1,000 fires burning on this. I'd be really interested from all three of you, you know, where do you think we really need to kind of lean in over the next year or so, or potentially with a new government? Where would you like us to really kind of like up our game on which of the policies we should really push for? Caroline, I'm going to bring you in because I know you need to go at 11, so I'll bring you in and then I'll come back to Claire and Jaynaide.
I mean, first and foremost, we've got to get the 9 p.m. watershed and the online advertising across the line, because that lays the kind of the framework for everything else, and then from there we dial it up. I mean, I think the packaging is really important. A Bite Back, we're going to launch a report next week that looks at packaging of so child appeal packaging, so not just cartoon characters actually, but other techniques that these businesses are using to market to children. And I mean, it probably won't surprise you to know that if you pick up a food that looks like it's attractive to children, it will be unhealthy. 78% of child appealing products are unhealthy. And this is what, you know, these are products you couldn't advertise on CBBC. You know, you couldn't put them on children's websites, yet we're sticking them on the bottom shelf in the supermarket, you know, for kids to zoom in on and pick up. So, you know, why are we letting businesses do that?
And we had a question in the chat earlier, which was about, is there evidence that, you know, with these kind of pester power techniques, whether it's marketing or whether it's packaging and use of cartoon characters, how far that influences parents to then go and buy these things? What do you know about kind of that interplay between something that's designed to appeal to children actually really in reality influencing the parent purchase?
Yeah, I think there is evidence. Some of the tactics in particular, so quite often, especially on these child appealing products, there'll be health and nutrition claims as well, which are legal, because if a product does have a certain amount of fiber or, you know, protein or added vitamins, you can say that on pack, and that gives a sense of reassurance to the parents, particularly on things like confectionery as well. We'll see that, you know, oh, it's, you know, be treat wise, and it kind of, you know, it lulls the parent into this kind of sense of security that it's, you know, that it's a good product because it's made for children. So, you know, how could it be a problem?
Back to you, Jaynaide and Claire. Of all of these policies, which is the one that personally you feel most passionate that we need to kind of get on top of? Claire, I'll come to you first.
Oh, I think I want to follow that order. It's with my children being just slightly older and having access to phones and then looking at apps, and it's the in-app advertising, that little drip feed, that pressure that they're placed under through notifications. And I can talk to them about that, and I can make sure that, well, we can turn things like that off, or I can talk and look at the apps that they're downloading. But why is it there in the first place? It's a temptation, a pressure that children don't need to be placed under and don't need to have. And, you know, they're navigating a huge amount online. Let's take at least this one thing away. I think when it comes to packaging, I just wanted to add, there's that glamorization of lifestyle and happiness. And as parents, you're looking for the quick wins, you're looking for the positive, you're looking when it comes to influencing children, yes, absolutely influencing parents too, because the characters are portraying fun and positivity, and those sort of, the packaging will take you to that place. And as a tired parent on the, you know, wanting the best for my children, I just keep my eyes open to what that influence, the choices that influence is having over me.
Thank you, Claire. Jaynaide, final words on this topic.
So I think I have two main thoughts. I will echo what was said before, in that the policies that were legislated in 2020 but were delayed, like the 9 p.m. watershed and stuff, I feel like they should be quick wins. This poll shows that there's high levels of support from parents, and so I think I think an argument at the time was made that there's a cost of living crisis, there's food inflation, and we don't want to make food more expensive for parents. But the poll also shows that parents are, we can be concerned about both things. We're concerned about the marketing and advertising our kids are exposed to, but we're also, we are acutely aware of food inflation and the cost of healthy food. Yes. And so I think that's something that would be key to be pushing over the next year to ensure it's not delayed again beyond 2025. But personally, as a parent, I think, as my son's still quite young, and I'm fortunate to not be in a situation where he doesn't watch TV, he doesn't have apps, he doesn't have a phone. A lot of the marketing and advertising, I'm able to shield him from at the moment. So I think the policy that I would push for is mandatory labelling to help me as a parent, while I'm still in control of pretty much everything he eats, to help me make the best decisions for him.
Great, thank you so much. Thanks to Caroline, Claire and Jaynaide, and to all the ambassadors that fed into this section. There's a big debate out there, and it feels like the in-app conversation is also feeding into this broader issue about children getting phones at a very young age, and the peer pressure around that, and the campaigns that are building around all the other online harms. And maybe we start to see this in the context of online harms, but also just the minefield of what sits on pack and what's an official label, and what's just a claim that is designed to kind of lure us into a false sense of healthiness. So, but that last point that Jaynaide made around the affordability of healthy versus unhealthy food, and how we can shift that balance to make healthy food the affordable, available choice for more parents, that came up also very strongly in our findings. So again, I'm going to bring Colette in first, and then we're going to bring in some more of our ambassadors. So over to you, Colette.
Thank you, Barbara. So I'm going to be sharing some of parents' views on the availability and affordability of healthy and unhealthy food and drinks. So secondary to children's eating preferences, we found that the affordability of healthy options is parents' biggest challenge in getting their children to eat healthily. And this is particularly a challenge for families from vulnerable socioeconomic groups. And that was actually their biggest challenge over children's eating habits. The availability of processed or unhealthy options was parents' third biggest challenge in getting their children to eat healthily. So the affordability of healthy options and the availability of processed or unhealthy options are really big challenges for parents. And we found that parents don't feel that the government or businesses are doing enough to make healthy food available or affordable for families. So less than half of parents think the government is doing enough to make healthy food affordable for families, and only half of parents think food companies are doing enough to make healthy food available and affordable for families. So 7 in 10 parents want government regulation. So they would like the government to require food companies to focus their price offers solely on healthy food. And they would like the government to mandate companies to reduce the amount of sugar and salt in the products they sell. And 8 in 10 parents would support the expansion of voucher schemes, such as the Healthy Start scheme for low-income families, to support families to be able to buy healthy food for their children. 8 in 10 parents would also support the government banning the sale of high caffeine energy drinks to children under 16. So I'm now going to hand you to another one of our fabulous ambassadors, Rounaq. So if you could please start your video and unmute, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
I'm not sure I can. I'm not allowed to start my video. Oh, there you go. Okay, no. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So the cost of living crisis and food inflation has made it even more challenging for parents to feed their children healthy food. At the same time, our supermarket shelves are stocked full of unhealthy products high in salt and sugar. So that's why our next manifesto pillar is asking for the government to make nutritious food affordable and accessible to all our families. To do this, we are asking the government to better support our most vulnerable families by reforming the existing Healthy Start voucher scheme and ensuring councils have funds to support families on low incomes. We also need our supermarkets to make healthier food and drinks more affordable by increasing discounts and special offers on healthy food products like fruits, vegetables, and pulses. And finally, we urge the government to do more to make food companies reduce the amount of salt, sugar, and saturated fat in our children's products without resorting to an increase in the use of artificial sweeteners. I'll now hand you over to Claire, who will be presenting our next and final call to action from the government.
Claire, are you able to come back on for us?
I think I'm waiting for authorization. Thank you. That's come through.
Okay.
Brilliant. So over the last few years, there's been an influx of energy drink brands targeting and appealing to our children. And energy drink consumption negatively influences our children's physical and mental health and can also lead to poorer sleep, quality, and academic performance. And we want the government to put a stop to the sale of high caffeine energy drinks to our children for this reason. Our children should not be drinking high caffeine energy drinks, and insights from the pollings demonstrate that this is a top priority for parents from across the UK. And it's interesting to see when it went from a concern to a policy opportunity, how that increased across the polling. Energy drinks, importantly, need to carry much more visible warning labels indicating that they're not suitable for children. Information is power, and for us to be able to really understand the impact that energy drinks have on children's sleep, academic performance, their own health is we need that information as parents. And much clearer information about the levels of sugar, caffeine and other additives should be displayed on the packaging of all energy drinks.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Claire and Rounaq. And Rounaq, just to introduce you as a new member of the panel, you've got 2 children, 2 and 8. One of just 2 fathers in our group of ambassadors. And so, if any, you know, we're really keen to have a few more dads in the room as well as we build this program. But thank you so much for all that you're contributing. And you also work in sustainable agri-food systems, focusing on how to make sure the food system can tackle challenges such as food poverty. And obviously this kind of balance about how do we make, what is it we need to do to make healthy food the affordable choices. And, you know, I'm just really interested in your reflections that, you know, is it really true that healthy food is always more expensive? And what ideas do we have for kind of trying to kind of increase access?
Yeah, so thank you for that introduction. Yes, healthy foods are tend to be more expensive in supermarkets or otherwise, and you know, having spoken to other families that may access food banks, for example, or any other alternate food support networks, also feel that it's easier and cheaper to buy more of the high processed, high fat, high sugar foods. In terms of what can be done, that is such a complex question. I don't think I'll be able to answer that in just the amount of time I have. But so there are many initiatives that various communities and groups are looking into. One of them is growing locally and involving communities in growing. So learning how to grow some fruits and vegetables that can be grown in your local environment without needing heavy capital. So learning to grow locally is one. Having the education at school level on how to grow, starting young is another potential intervention. How much can governments be involved? I mean, yes, governments do need to be involved, but there needs to be more than just a government, or more than just a top-down approach, is my opinion on what needs to be done. But again, a very complex question, and one I won't be able to answer in 2 minutes.
Thank you for that, Rounaq. And I think one of the things that we believe in Sustain as well is there's not really such a thing as food poverty. There's poverty, and poverty is creating food insecurity. So unless we tackle some of those root causes around wages and living wages, benefit levels for people, then we're going to continue in this, and we should not be proud of being a food bank nation. We need to find sustainable, dignified ways of supporting people to access food. I want to introduce the rest of the panel to you as well. We also now have Louise Burke joining us from the online parenting forum Netmums, which is one of the UK's leading parenting kind of peer support platforms. And I'll be coming to you in a minute. But before I do, also I want to introduce Mezreet Rasul, another of our parent ambassadors based up in the Northwest, and your parent to 3 children, 2 of whom are now grown up. And lots of experience of working with children in early years. And I'm wondering about your reflections on this interplay between healthy and unhealthy food, and how we increase access to healthy food with the parents that you're working with, and in your own experience, Mezreet.
Yes, so personally, I think in the early years, what we've been discussing today, from farm to fork, and there's a lot of initiatives that we can see in early years now, where they're starting to grow their own foods, and that's what we are doing at our nursery now, where the children grow their own carrots and tomatoes, and then they look after them, and then they're putting them on the table and eating. But one of my biggest reasons for joining Sustain as an ambassador as well was the drinks, the high caffeine drinks. My 13-year-old daughter is a type 1 diabetic, recently diagnosed, and you're always told as a type 1 diabetic, you can have sugar-free drinks. It's okay to have sugar-free drinks. So she bought a sugar-free drink, and when she drank it, the high level of caffeines, I saw her levels from 5.5 go to 20 within 40 minutes, and her face started flustering, and so I could see the impact on her. But as a parent, to actually see this going up on a chart, and then having to give your child insulin to bring it down, it's quite scary for all the children you see drinking all these drinks first thing in the morning. How are they supposed to concentrate in the classroom?
Yeah.
After drinking all these,
Yeah, and we when the government consulted on this, we had really high levels of concern from teachers about the effects when children have those drinks instead of breakfast on their way to school, for example, and things like that.
I personally think the curriculum, like we've said, it needs education. We need to educate our children from a young age.
Yeah,
make the parents more aware.
Yeah,
because I had no awareness of this. Just from my daughter being diagnosed and seeing them levels go so high is scary.
Yeah. And although those drinks do say not suitable for children or breastfeeding and pregnant women, it says that as well.
As a parent,
it's very tiny writing, and often on the back, and it's not very clear.
And your child's been told you can have sugar-free drinks, it's okay.
Yeah. So that would be one, what we call a low-hanging piece of soft drink.
Yeah.
But we could just, the government, it will be a fairly routine thing because they already are required by law to label them. I want to bring in Louise from Netmums, and you've got 2 decades of experience in news and feature journalism and working with a variety of different news outlets, but also now are the editorial director on Netmums. And just really interested in your reflections. How do you see these issues playing out in Netmums, Louise? And also, you know, what's your response to some of this research and what our parents are saying?
So we have a really wide ranging audience at Netmums. All different walks of life, different backgrounds, different socioeconomic backgrounds. So we hear all sorts of stories. Myself, I've got 3 kids as well, all at primary stage, although one of them's going into secondary in September. I'm on the school run. I do see those secondary kids at the corner, at the end of the road, at the shop, getting the Red Bulls and the high energy drinks, and I see them at lunchtime as well, getting their fried chicken for lunch as well from the takeout. And married with that, seeing your research and the manifesto, I do think we're in a sort of a sorry state of affairs here, and action definitely needs to be taken. Health is a high priority. We know of Netmums users. Research last year said that 80% would like to cook their family meals from scratch. So there is an interest, a need, like they want their health of their children is a priority. But we go back to what we've discussed this morning about cost of living, financial restraints, accessibility to food. I think personally, I find the marketing of foods in supermarkets shocking, with whether it be with the use of cartoon faces on very high sugary foods. I find that awful. I also know from experience standing by the till next to the discount sort of buckets that you get, where it's, you know, 10 donuts for £1, or all the promotions being on junk food as opposed to healthy food. I know there's been efforts by supermarkets like Tesco, who offer apples to kids when they're sort of doing the rounds around Tesco, the supermarket for the shop. Which is great to see, but absolutely, like, I back all the thoughts today and the findings that you've made, that we do need action to be taken. I was shocked to see on one of your quotes in the manifesto that someone had said their kid's phone pinged up to say in the morning which deal they should get from McDonald's that day and which burger was on offer. I mean, how enticing is that to probably a sugar addicted teenager, so unknowingly sugar addicted. So we had also on the Netmums podcast recently, just this week, we had Dr. Chris van Tulleken, who obviously is the author of the Ultra High Processed Foods, him talking to a couple of my colleagues on the podcast, raising the issue that 25% of primary school children leave obese now, which is a much higher figure. He compared that to a 5% figure from, I can't remember the exact amount of years ago. But isn't that shocking that 25% of our primary school children are leaving primary school obese at 10 or 11? I mean, something's going wrong. I feel like I'm in personally a privileged position in that my kids are at a London school and they're getting the free meals. They benefit from the free meals. And actually, going back to someone that had written something in the Q&A earlier, similar to them, their experience, all the parents were actually invited into my children's school, and we got to taste all the home cooked foods. I mean, I know they've changed their caterer about 3 times in the last sort of 18 months at my kids' school, trying to get it right, which is great to see. And they invited the parents in to taste the food and all the healthy options. And actually, I'm one of the lucky ones in that my kids come home talking about their school meals being lovely and tasty and healthy. And it's great that they're getting to taste bang bang chicken and lasagna and chicken chow mein, you know, like all these great recipes that maybe I wouldn't be, as a working mum, wouldn't be necessarily cooking each night either. So, you know, but yes, I recognise I'm lucky, but matched with that, I feel so disappointed that not every child in the UK gets to experience that, and they should do.
Absolutely. I'm going to thank you so much, Louise. So much food for thought in there, right from advertising back to where we've come full circle back into schools. And we've had a question in the chat as well about, you know, there's government policies, and then there's things that we can do as communities, as parents, with our schools, around this. How do we create this shift towards healthy food? Can we do more to kind of protect children at a local level? I know, Claire, you work locally as well, so I'm just kind of curious, you know, how do we, what more can we do at local level as communities and parents, do you think?
I think that's such a good point, that I think it was mentioned earlier about it will be about policy top down, that creates that reaction, that resistance, that you can't tell me what to do sort of concern. And I think, as was introduced at the very beginning, this is a really highly emotive topic. It's a topic where you can very easily feel judged, you can feel blamed, it can be very hard making the right choices, as we've talked about. But the world that we live in is huge. We can be informed as parents, all the knowledge, but we are so influenced by what's around us, by advertising, by how we walk to school. And to make changes in both the school environment and also the environment that we live in, we need to own it and understand it, and then build that energy within the community, that actually we don't want to be bombarded with advertising. We'd like, you know, businesses need to run, but also can there be healthy choices within some of those local businesses, so that we have choices over the food that we pick up at lunchtime. I think fried chicken was referred to earlier. Well, their shops that sell fried chicken also have healthier choices available to them, and often sell healthier choices. But can we support those shops and those businesses to be more informed about what they're selling, about what the local community would like, and about choice, so that we can have the ability to make healthy choices across the board. But I think actually having that knowledge and working together as a community is as powerful as government policy on this one.
Thank you so much, Claire. My colleague has placed a little link in the chat for you all. If you are, we're coming to the last 10 minutes of the webinar. So we have now, we're going to re-enable the chat in case you want to kind of put any comments. But also there's a link there for you to give us your feedback on this webinar before you go. So don't go without clicking on that link. Just to continue the conversation, and also, you know, any of our remaining ambassadors, and Stephanie, if you want to come back in for the final 10 minutes of this webinar. We've got one here, a question here from Jess McKenzie, who works in the children's food industry, and she says they constantly come up against the prevailing attitude from their buyers, from consumers, that children's food has to be very cheap. And that means, and she thinks that is one of the reasons that the children's food market is being swamped by UPF, why school meals are kind of shortcutting and the quality that parents want. How do we overcome that? Would any of you like to pick up that question?
I think it's difficult. What I will say is that, I mean, I think what it kind of alludes to, that there is a bit of a tension when, you know, the foods on the shelves need to have long shelf lives, which mean they're more likely to be processed and so on. But there are core ingredients that are, you know, relatively cheap, lentils, beans, you know, just examples that, I mean, I don't work in kind of, you know, food development, but I would assume could be healthier options. And personally, as a parent, I would prefer to have food on the shelf that have shorter shelf lives, if it meant that they were composed of healthier products. Yeah, that's my view on that.
Yeah, I also, I think we've kind of got into a space where sometimes there's a convenience thing, not just a price thing. So, one of those little bags of carrot flavor sticks is not cheaper than a real set of carrot sticks. But it's perhaps just, it's just that easy bag to throw in a rucksack. But actually, it's just an extruded snack with very little nutritional value, whereas the carrot sticks are pretty good. So there is also a kind of a little bit of a myth around this. But I think there is this real pressure on companies to kind of like make things as cheap as possible as well. Stephanie, is there anything you want to say around that kind of budgeting funding issue that is going on around school food as well, and the price pressures that exist there?
Yeah, there's a bit of jeopardy here because we want more children to be having a hot school lunch. We know the research shows us that only less than 2% of packed lunches meet nutrition standards, so that we know the best meal for a child at lunchtime is a hot school dinner. But we also are aware that the funding right now is not kept pace with inflation. We know that there is different prices for free school meal allocation, both universal and means tested across the country. The lowest prices in England, in London, the mayor's rollout of Key Stage 2 free meals is going to be at £3. So there's great disparity across the country. So we know that there does need to be fairer funding across the country. We know that if news comes out from contract caterers who are trying to, explain the pressures they're under, and they are real pressures because we know about food inflation, but as long as we're getting messages about school food being of poor quality because they haven't got the budget and standards not being met, that is not helping the cause. Because what we want is a universal offer that benefits from the economies of scale to get quality on the plate so every child is sitting down and having a hot school lunch. So we have to be mindful that there needs to be some work on the budget, and at School Food Matters we're doing some research right now to look at the cost of a healthy, sustainable school meal, because nobody really knows what it is because it hasn't kept price up with inflation. So that's going to be interesting. More funding needs to go in, more creativity in the kitchen when it comes to menus and monitoring compliance. If we get those three things together, we'll be in a better place.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. And Alison has made a very good point in the Q&A, which is that outside of London, school meals in Key Stage 2 are not free for all. In England, they're becoming free increasingly in Wales and Scotland. And many local councils like hers are having to increase the prices, and that's seeing families dropping out of school meals and starting to bring in packed lunches. And as we know, the cost of living pressures have also then affected what people are putting into those packed lunches as well. So then you don't necessarily see children getting the nutrients that they need. We're coming to the last few minutes of our webinar now. We've got a final little poll for you all, which my colleague Kate is going to put up. If you want to kind of have a look at that. So we're kind of interested at the end of this webinar, out of the 5 manifesto pillars, which one is the one that you would love us to see doing more work on to push the government to increase the policies? We're just really interested in the mood of the room, which is the area of this manifesto that is most exciting you, that you think we could push hardest on. Okay, and then I think we're probably out of time for questions. Now with the panel, I just want to finish the webinar by saying, this is the start of this journey. We'd love to keep engaging with you all, with our friends at School Food Matters and Netmums and Bite Back and all the other organisations who are on this call, to kind of build this out, this manifesto. Our thinking is it's a conversation. We'd want to hear what you think we've missed, but also we're going to be working to dig in a little bit more deeply into some of these areas around early years, around school food, potentially around marketing and labelling. So please do stay in touch with us. If you're not already subscribing to the Children's Food Campaign website and to get our updates, please make sure to do that. We'll send the link out to you. You will get the recording of this webinar along with the slides. Please do fill out the feedback form and we'll also send that out to you following the webinar. I'd just like to thank everybody who's been involved in making this happen today. First and foremost, our 13 children's food ambassadors who have given up a large amount of time to join workshops, to send us their ideas, to prepare for this. And we're really grateful for all the expertise that you're bringing in to the work of the Children's Food Campaign. To Savanta, who we worked with to conduct this research, to Louise at Netmums, Stephanie at School Food Matters, to Caroline at Bite Back, and most personally from me to my team, particularly to Naima, who is running the Children's Food Ambassador Programme. It's been her baby, as it were, at Sustain, and has done such a great job. We are likely to be opening up more places to join that panel later this year, so please do stay in touch with us if you're interested in that, or if you would like to work with us on any of these topics, please do get in touch with us. I'd also like to thank Colette, who has brilliantly managed all of this research, and also to Kate in the Children's Food Campaign, who's been behind the scenes just making sure all our tech is working well, but also has been a brilliant advisor behind the scenes into all of this work. So thank you so much for joining us today. Please stay in touch and please give us your feedback. Thank you and have a good day.